Hey, what's up, Logos American History students? Welcome back to another week. Happy Monday. Happy May 11th, 2020. This is day 33 of our COVID-19 e-learning experience. Again, happy Monday. Hope you all had a good weekend. Hope you all had a good Mother's Day. I've had the pleasure of getting to meet and speak with and communicate with many mothers of the students out there, and so I know we got some really cool moms out there. So if you didn't let your mom know how cool she is yesterday, make sure you do that today and tell them I said a belated happy Mother's Day as well. But it is Monday, so let's get right into the Blackbaud and the e-learning. So we'll go ahead and take a look at our Blackbaud bulletin board. There it is. We see our bulletin board with our instructions. We scroll down, we see the message from last week. But we're going to look at first the three tabs at the top. Let's look at the topics tab. And we are in a new topic, the 1960s. 1960s, right? We started talking a little bit about the 1960s previously with the civil rights movement, but this is going to look at some of the politics and presidents and things that were going on besides the civil rights movement in the 1960s. 1960s is an interesting decade. We have, I think, four different presidents in the 1960s. It begins with the president we had for most of the 1950s, Dwight Eisenhower. But in 1960, we have an election, and Eisenhower's vice president, Richard Nixon, runs against John F. Kennedy, and Nixon loses, right? And we get a new president, John F. Kennedy. But he's only president, as we know, for a few years before he's assassinated. And his vice president, Lyndon Johnson, becomes president. He serves until 1969, when, after an election in 1968, who takes over as president in 1969? Richard Nixon. Right? And then he's president for the first part of the 1970s. And so we see this kind of arc. We go from Eisenhower to Kennedy to Johnson to Nixon, right? All throughout the 1960s, and it's quite the roller coaster that it sounds in the 1960s. But let's take a look at the 1960s topic. If we click on the topic, we see a picture of some important events and people from the 1960s. Of course, the moon landing, the Beatles, the Vietnam War, right? A lot of things went on in the 1960s. We want to begin in the 1960s, again, talking about the last, or the first president of the 1960s, the last president of the 1950s. You know, this is kind of the transition from the old Republican Eisenhower, the old World War II General Eisenhower, and then we see the new John F. Kennedy. So before we can move on to the new, we want to take one last look at the old. And a good way to start off the 1960s is looking at Eisenhower's farewell address, right? This is a common thing, presidents at the end of their term as president. And Eisenhower was the first president who could not run for a third term. Other presidents didn't, besides FDR, but after FDR, they made a rule saying everyone from Eisenhower on can't run for a third term. So Eisenhower was the first president to be affected by this. And so at the end of his second term, the election's already happened. Kennedy's getting ready to take over. He gives his farewell address. And that's what we're going to be reading today. So the reading right here, if you download it, I'll go ahead and download it right now, we'll see, is a 2-page excerpt of his farewell address to the nation on January 17th, 1961. And you see there are a few questions to go along with that. So you're going to read his address. You're going to go into the Assignments tab, Assignments, where you will find the assignment, right? You can also find the download of the top of the speech. You can also find the Google Forms submission there, right? If we go in there, you can submit your questions through Google Forms. Again, there's 3 questions to answer. Or you can always submit right here through the online submission box. Just type your answers right over here and then click Submit Assignment. Either way, right? But you got 3 questions. And it's all about one thing that Eisenhower does in this speech, which is interesting. He's pretty smart guy. He predicts the future. He says, you know what? we have this thing called a military-industrial complex that we've never had in our country before. And we're going to have it with us for a long time. And we have to be careful because if the military-industrial complex gets too big, right? Military-industrial complex is industry, a big part of the economy that makes its money off of war. And so we need a strong military. We need strong national defense, but we also want to be careful of giving these people too much power. And we want to try and avoid a state of constant war. And he predicts this, and that's pretty much what happens throughout the 60s, 70s, 80s, and really, arguably, all the way up to today. And so that gets us to our question of the day. So if we go back into assignments, if I go back, I'm in assignments, and I scroll down to our participation for the day, question of the day. Question of the day. And this is what it says. Spending by the U.S. government on military, defense, homeland security has seen a steady increase over the past several decades. Do you think that the United States should dedicate more or less resources to defense and national security? More or less, or just right? And why? Doesn't matter what you say, it's just why. Why is the important part of that? How much should Americans be asked to sacrifice, financially or otherwise, in the name of national security? So that second part of the question is a big deal, right? Because again, when you look at these charts, if we open these charts in a new tab so we can see them bigger, right? We went from $82 billion in 1970 to $678 billion spent on national defense in 2019. $678 billion, right? If we go back to this one, right? Let's see. Open this image. We see that defense, homeland security, this orange piece of the pie, that is, of all the money that the government spends, that's how much they spend on defense and homeland security. The bigger pieces of the pie, health, social security, are the two biggest ones, but this accounts for what? About a fifth of the entire budget is on military spending? Is that enough? Is that too much? This last chart, if we look at this compares us to other countries. And look when you compare us to other countries, look how much they spend on defense compared to us. We spend $648 billion, right? China's the next closest. They spend 200, or Russia, or the rest of the world. The rest of the world, not including all these countries, spends less than $300 billion. China, the closest country, single country to us, spends $250 billion. We spend $650 billion. Is that too much? It seems like a lot. But that's what you're going to answer on the question of the day. Should we spend more? Should we spend less? But not just that. It's not just money we're spending. Should we be willing to give up some of our freedoms, some of our liberties in the name of national security? I mean, paying taxes is one freedom, liberty that we're giving up to pay for all this. But, in the name of national security, should we allow the government to spy on us? You tell me. Answer the question of the day. Take a look at Eisenhower's farewell address and answer those questions. And as always, if you have any concerns or questions, let me know. And I'll see y'all later. Peace.